This is America in the Morning from Westwood One. It's Tuesday, April 8th, 2025. I'm Clayton Neville in for John Trout. Here's what's coming up on America in the Morning.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visits the White House to talk tariffs, the Gaza Strip, and Iran's nuclear program. I'm John Stolnis in Washington.
We'll have the latest on tariffs impacting U.S. and world markets.
I mourn with all of you who mourn my children.
Opening statements in the trial of the so-called Doomsday Mom. I'm Bob Brown.
President Trump has honored the World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers at the White House. Sagar Meghani, Washington.
On Wall Street, turns out the White House is negotiating on tariffs, and that eased investors a bit. Stocks avoided a massive drop. I'm Jessica Ettinger.
Chief Justice John Roberts paused a deadline for the return of a Maryland man mistakenly deported to El Salvador. Ed Donahue, Washington.
All ahead on America in the Morning. President Trump welcomed Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to the White House for a visit, the first by a world leader since the president announced his new tariffs. John Stolnis has a recap from Washington of the conversation that included tariffs, Gaza, and Iran.
You stand by us. You're standing with us. You are a great, great champion of our alliance.
Netanyahu praising the president for his steadfast support of Israel during remarks in the Oval Office. President Trump said the bond between himself and the Jewish people is ironclad.
We are a friend of Israel, as you know. I would say that I'm by far the best president that Israel has ever even thought of seeing.
In an effort to prevent the Iranians from building nuclear weapons, the president announcing a round of high-level diplomacy between Iran and the U.S. this weekend.
We're having direct talks with Iran, and they've started. It'll go on Saturday. We have a very big meeting, and we'll see what can happen. And I think everybody agrees that doing a deal would be preferable to doing the obvious. And the obvious is not something that I want to be involved with, or frankly, that Israel wants to be involved with if they can avoid it. So we're going to see if we can avoid it.
Trump was asked if military strikes are on the table if a nuclear deal cannot be reached.
I think if the talks aren't successful with Iran, I think Iran is going to be in great danger. And I hate to say it. Great danger, because they can't have a nuclear weapon.
The president also once again calling for an end to the war in Gaza, but said he understands Israel's mission to get their hostages back and end Hamas's rule in the Strip.
Well, I'd like to see the war stop, and I think the war will stop at some point that won't be in the too distant future. Right now we have a problem with hostages. We're trying to get the hostages out. We got quite a few of them out, but it's a long process. It shouldn't be that long.
Once the war is over, President Trump once again promoting the idea of a U.S.-led effort to take control of the Gaza and shuttle Palestinians to other countries.
And if you take the people, the Palestinians, and move them around to different countries, and you have plenty of countries that will do that, and you really have a freedom zone. You call it the freedom zone, a free zone, a zone where people aren't going to be killed every day. That's a hell of a place.
And as for tariffs, Netanyahu announced they will work with the U.S. on coming up with a new trade deal.
We will eliminate the trade deficit with the United States. We intend to do it very quickly. We think it's the right thing to do.
A new 17% tariff against Israel is set to kick in along with the rest of the Liberation Day tariffs on Wednesday morning. John Stolnis, Washington.
World leaders are reacting in different ways to President Trump's tariffs. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with President Trump this week and said that his country would begin eliminating its trade surplus with the U.S., saying it's the right thing to do. China, though, with a different approach. It responded to Trump's 34% tariff increase with an additional 34% of its own. The president then threatened another 50% to U.S. tariffs. Meanwhile, the European Union responded to President Trump's tariffs with an offer of 0 for 0. The president, though, said that's not enough.
The EU has been very tough over the years. It was formed to really do damage to the United States in trade.
The Japanese prime minister called President Trump this week in what U.S. officials say was the beginning of negotiations with that country to implement the president's tariffs. Trump allies defending the tariffs and urging patience. Peter Navarro, White House senior counselor for trade, predicted a new golden age once the trade deals are finalized. He spoke with Fox News.
It's going to be companies in the S&P 500 manufactured, who are the first to produce here. Those are the ones going to lead the recovery.
House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries responded to a stock market plunge with reporters.
The rich get richer?
The Dow has fallen over 4,000 points, sending markets into bear territory. Republicans like Senator Ted Cruz and Senator Rand Paul have been weary of long-term impacts of tariffs. Senator Cruz said in his podcast just this week that tariffs would be considered a win if the administration used the policy as leverage to quickly negotiate, but said if the plan stays in place long-term, it could increase inflation. A championship American sports team makes a trip to the White House. We'll tell you which one and who made the trip when America in the Morning returns. Stay with us. We're working our way toward mid-April on this early Tuesday morning. Some of us are going to see rain. No surprise in the spring. Here's meteorologist Matt Rindy to tell us where.
First thing this morning, an Arctic cold front will be moving through much of the northeastern states, having passed through the Great Lakes region already. This is going to usher in some very cold air with highs no better than the 30s in Michigan into much of Pennsylvania and northward to New England. Some areas east of the Appalachians will still manage to get into the 40s before that colder air arrives, and some places will also remain in the 20s, and this is about 10 to 20 degrees below the historical average. The cooler weather will even extend into parts of Kentucky and Tennessee, eastward through Virginia, and even into parts of Alabama, Georgia, and the Carolinas, where highs will be in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Meanwhile, another lingering cold front from the storm yesterday will still be sliding southward through southern Florida, and there'll be some showers and thunderstorms along it, some of which could be heavy enough to cause localized flooding. In the northwest, we have rain continuing to develop from a storm just offshore in the Washington and Oregon coast. This will send impulses of moisture eastward with a few showers into Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. The rest of the west into the Plains states will have a largely dry day today with a good amount of sunshine. Highs will be mostly in the 60s and 70s in the west, but warm into the mid-90s in the southwest. And the 70s and 80s will cover a good portion of Texas, northward to Kansas, western Nebraska, a nice change from having snow just a few days ago. And 60s and 70s will reach as far north as eastern Montana into the western Dakotas. That's the weather across America. It'll be a very warm day in Palm Springs, California, with plenty of sunshine and a high of 96. Contrasting that will be Syracuse, New York, where the high will be 31 with a couple of snow showers. That's the nation's weather. I'm AccuWeather.com meteorologist Matt Rindy.
Remember to follow us everywhere you get your podcasts. You can listen on your preferred platform. Just search America in the Morning in your favorite listening app. The latest murder trial of the so-called Doomsday Mom began in an Arizona court where Lori Vallow Daybell is representing herself. Following the story is correspondent Bob Brown.
Opening statements Monday in a Phoenix, Arizona courtroom in the trial of the so-called Doomsday Cult Mom. Convicted killer Lori Vallow Daybell representing herself on charges she conspired to murder her fourth husband, Charles Vallow, with the help of her brother, Alex Cox, and her fifth husband, Chad Daybell. Last year, she was sentenced to life in prison in Idaho after being convicted of conspiracy and murder for the deaths of her two youngest children, as well as her husband's first wife. Court TV covering the trial with statements from Maricopa County Attorney Trina Kay and Lori Vallow seated at a table dressed in prison garb.
When she messaged Alex to provide them with that religious authority to kill Charles.
I mourn with all of you who mourn my children. Jesus Christ knows the truth of what happened here.
Vallow recently sitting for an interview with True Crime Arizona.
Can you define family tragedy for me?
Yeah.
Obviously, you were convicted of killing your kid. Where does that disconnect?
Convicted.
You believe wrongly convicted?
Absolutely, 100%.
So then, how do you address that? You were convicted of it. They're not here. So what happened?
Vallow's attorney is advising her not to answer that question. I'm Bob Brown.
The latest honor for the Baseball World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers was a visit to the White House. Washington correspondent Sagar Meghani reports.
In the East Room, it was Ohtani mania.
Unanimous National League MVP
Shohei Ohtani,
calling out the Japanese superstar's historic season.
The first ever member of the 50-50 club.
And
looks like a movie star.
The president said he did not want to admit having watched Dodger Mookie Betts when he played for the Red Sox, being a Yankees fan and friend of late owner George Steinbrenner.
He had very few friends.
And remembers watching Yankee games with the boss.
You were exhausted by the end of the game.
The president also took a swipe at California's Democratic senators.
I just don't particularly like him, so I won't introduce.
Earning a mix of cheers and jeers.
I didn't think it was that big a deal, actually. Washington.
Sagar Meghani, Washington.
Stock market plunges lead to pleas for patience. We'll get to that when America in the Morning returns after this. Tuesday Business brought to you by Fisher Investments. Fisher Investments takes a disciplined approach with investing, helping clients navigate volatile markets. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Here's CNBC's Jessica Ettinger with Tuesday Business.
Wall Street opens this morning after a mixed day for the markets. Wild swings for stocks, with the Dow moving 2,500 points, but it finished down only 350. The Nasdaq actually finished in the green yesterday by 15 points. Investors really liked a flip-flop from the White House, as President Trump says, yes, the tariffs are being negotiated.
We have many countries that are coming to negotiate deals with us.
Trump's statement eased market stress after different White House officials were saying different things.
The Treasury Secretary here indicating that there is a live negotiation now between the United States and Japan, at least, even though you've had folks like Peter Navarro from this White House on television saying this is not a negotiation. You now have the Treasury Secretary saying this is a negotiation.
CNBC's Eamon Javers, but the trade war with China escalated yesterday as the president threatened a new 50% tariff if Beijing doesn't remove its tariffs, retaliating against the U.S. and those tariffs from last week. Some are calling it a game of chicken.
How long does it take to kill an economy that was pretty strong?
We're about to find out if they don't ease off on these tariffs.
Yardeni Research's Ed Yardeni with CNBC's Joe Kernan. U.S. crude oil WTI, that's West Texas Intermediate, has been falling. That's not always good for the oil business.
But you're sitting in WTI terms at $60 a barrel. That's below the break-evens of some of those shale guys at 65. You go down below 55, you're now below the economics of the Permian.
Carlisle's Jeff Curry on CNBC. The Permian Basin is the oil-rich area in Texas and New Mexico. Mortgage rates ticked a little higher yesterday. They were back up to 6 3/4% for a 30-year fixed home loan, according to Mortgage News Daily. Real estate experts say the Trump tariff agenda is making a mess of the spring housing market, even for wealthier people.
Most of the activity is on the higher end of the market. Those are people who invest and who are seeing their portfolios drop dramatically. And so if they're thinking, I wanted to move up into that home, but I'm worried about my retirement funds, I'm worried about where the economy is going, or maybe I'm worried that I'm going to lose my job, I don't think I'm going to buy that house right now.
Yeah, and if they were hoping to sell stocks to fund the down payment, that's likely way down, and so now they have less money for the down payment.
CNBC's Brian Sullivan and Diana Olick. On today's watch list, all eyes on the markets and the latest on tariffs. Earnings are coming from Walgreens and egg producer Cal-Maine Foods. And we get the latest on how small business owners are feeling about the economy.
A Supreme Court justice pauses a midnight deadline for the Trump administration. We've got the what and the why when America in the Morning returns after these messages. Chief Justice John Roberts agreed to pause a midnight deadline for the Trump administration to return a Maryland man deported by mistake to a notorious prison in El Salvador. Correspondent Ed Donahue has details.
Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts paused a deadline for the return of a Maryland man mistakenly deported to El Salvador. A federal judge has ordered the administration to return Kilmar Abrego Garcia. The Justice Department went to the Supreme Court, saying the judge was overstepping her authority. The administration has conceded Abrego Garcia should not have been sent to El Salvador because an immigration judge found he likely would have faced persecution by local gangs, but argued he's no longer in U.S. custody, and the government has no way to get him back. The White House has described Abrego Garcia's deportation as an administrative error, but has said he was an MS-13 gang member. Attorneys for Abrego Garcia say there's no evidence he was in MS-13. He has never been convicted of any crime. Ed Donahue, Washington.
The North Carolina Supreme Court temporarily blocked a lower court ruling that would have required that more than 65,000 votes cast in the disputed 2024 state Supreme Court race be recounted and be verified. The state Supreme Court issued a 2-sentence order saying it wants to review an appeal from the Democratic candidate in that contest. In last year's election, the Democrat was slightly ahead of her Republican challenger by just 734 votes. Republican candidate Jefferson Griffin's legal team filed challenges across the state. Even small changes to the vote count in the race could impact the outcome. America in the Morning for Tuesday, April 8th, 2025 is produced by Jeff McKay. I'm Clayton Neville in for John Trout, and this is Westwood One. This is America in the Morning from Westwood One. I'm Clayton Neville in for John Trout. Here's what's coming up this half hour.
President Trump is threatening more tariffs on China.
We're putting a 50% tariff.
Sagar Meghani, Washington.
U.S.-Iran nuclear talks this weekend.
It'll be really great for Iran, I can tell you that.
I'm Richard Johnson.
Days of unrelenting heavy rain and storms kill at least 18 people across the South. I'm Julie Walker.
Speaker Mike Johnson has cut a deal regarding parents' proxy voting for new mothers in Congress. I'm Sue Aller.
Maine suing the Trump administration and HHS plans for drinking water.
It was happy days again for fans of the classic sitcom. I'm Kevin Carr.
We'll be right back. Wake it up on this early spring day, and we've still got some cold weather to talk about. Not everywhere, but meteorologist Matt Rindy sorts it out.
We are going to continue to see some rain in the northwest, especially on the Washington and Oregon coast from a system just offshore. This will send impulses of moisture eastward with a few showers heading into Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. The rest of the west into the plain states will have largely dry weather today with a good amount of sunshine. Highs will be mostly in the 60s and 70s in the west, but warm into the mid-90s in the southwest. We'll have 70s and 80s covering a good portion of Texas, northward to Kansas and western Nebraska. A nice change from having snow in some of these areas just a few days ago. 60s and 70s will even reach as far north as eastern Montana into the western Dakotas. In the eastern Dakotas into Minnesota and Iowa, there will be some recovery after a cold day yesterday. Many areas will be in the 40s, 50s, and 60s after being mostly in the 30s and 40s yesterday. An Arctic cold front will be moving through much of the northeastern states first thing this morning, having passed through the Great Lakes region already. This will usher in some very cold air with highs no better than the 30s through Michigan into much of Pennsylvania and then northward into New England. Some areas east of the Appalachians will still manage to get into the 40s before the colder air arrives, and some places will also hold in the 20s. This is about 10 to 20 degrees below the historical average. The cooler weather will also extend into parts of Kentucky and Tennessee, eastward through Virginia, and even parts of Alabama, Georgia, and the Carolinas, where highs will be in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Meanwhile, another lingering cold front from the storm yesterday will be sliding southward through southern Florida with some showers and thunderstorms along it. Some of these storms could be heavy enough for localized flooding. That's the nation's weather. I'm AccuWeather.com meteorologist Matt Rindy.
Remember to follow us everywhere you get your podcasts. Follow and listen on your favorite platform. Just search America in the Morning in your favorite listening app. It was a whipsaw ride on Wall Street to start the week, with worldwide worries about President Trump's tariff plans and new additional penalties for China after the Chinese leadership ordered retaliatory tariffs against the U.S. As Washington correspondent Sagar Meghani reports, while Wall Street is looking better before markets open, concern is still growing in the Senate, where the body's top Democrat and the GOP's Rand Paul have serious issues with the Trump tariffs as a whole.
HSBC, Deutsche Bank, Bank of America all said the same thing. The tariffs have made a recession more likely. And now, today, Goldman Sachs are the ones saying danger. Some analysts say the damage is already done. $6 trillion of value have been wiped out.
I don't want to live under emergency rule. I don't want to live where my representatives cannot speak for me and have a check and balance on power. One person can make a mistake. And guess what? Tariffs are a terrible mistake. They don't work. They will lead to higher prices. They are a tax, and they have historically been bad for our economy.
President Trump is threatening more tariffs on China, raising more concerns about unleashing a global trade war. Shortly before the markets finished another down day, the president noted Beijing defied his warning not to retaliate against his tariffs and slapped another 34% on the U.S.
If that tariff isn't removed by tomorrow at 12 o'clock, we're putting a 50% tariff on above the tariffs that we put on.
China says pressure and threats will not work, and amid pressure on him to consider pausing the tariffs.
We're not looking at that.
The president says he is willing to negotiate, and so is the European Commission's president.
Because Europe is always ready for a good deal.
But Ursula von der Leyen warns retaliation's an option too. Either way, Germany's economy minister says European partners must stay united against American threats.
If you try to solve the problem on your own, this will not be successful.
Sagar Meghani, Washington.
As the world deals with President Trump's latest moves on tariffs, there was a bombshell announcement regarding a major diplomatic development. The president says the U.S. will hold direct talks with Iran on its nuclear program. Details from correspondent Rich Johnson.
It was during an Oval Office appearance with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu when the president personally broke the news.
We're dealing with the Iranians. We have a very big meeting on Saturday, and we're dealing with them directly.
Trump expressed both hope for a deal.
Maybe a deal is going to be made. That would be great. It'll be really great for Iran, I can tell you that.
And issued a veiled threat if there's no progress.
I think if the talks aren't successful with Iran, I think Iran is going to be in great danger. And I hate to say it, great danger, because they can't have a nuclear weapon.
A point the president repeated, as he also refused to say who will represent the U.S. or where the talks will take place. But the London-based channel Iran International, which is banned inside Iran, reports the talks will take place in the Persian Gulf country of Oman. On Iran's own state media, a foreign ministry official insisted the talks will be indirect, not direct, as the president said. Trump's offer to negotiate, which he sent to Iran last month, proposes a 2-month window to agree on a nuclear deal. Iran's nuclear program recently reached a new milestone, as experts believe the country can now produce enough material for a bomb in 1 or 2 weeks, even though it might take another year after that to use the material to build a nuclear warhead. I'm Rich Johnson.
Days of relentless heavy rain led to flash flooding and combined with tornadoes ripped through the Midwest and the South as the death toll rises from the storms and stories of horror from Kentucky. The latest from correspondent Julie Walker.
Days of unrelenting heavy rain and storms kill at least 18 people across the South, including a 9-year-old walking to catch a school bus swept away in floodwaters and a 5-year-old when a tree fell on his home. Governor Andy Beshear says the Kentucky River in Frankfort has crested, almost breaking a record.
What we have seen is rescue after rescue after rescue.
Other rivers crested to almost near record levels, and some are still rising, says National Weather Service meteorologist Mark Jarvis.
You had the right atmospheric conditions come together to produce extremely heavy rainfall.
and produce catastrophic flooding.
Officials caution people not to drive through floodwaters and heed evacuation orders.
4 days of severe storms have brought devastation to so many communities across our Commonwealth. We've had search and rescue teams working around the clock to support these communities.
The Kentucky River in Frankfort cresting at almost record levels, causing massive flooding of homes, roads, and businesses, including at local radio station Froggy 101.7, 104.9, where Paisley Dunn Banks hosts the morning show.
Just blows my mind. You can't even imagine a home floating down a river until you see it. And the other stuff, like there's so much debris floating around.
Dunn Banks had to evacuate her home, which also sits on the river. Mayor Lane Wilkerson.
Water is receding a little bit, but we want to make sure of that first, and we're evaluating the situation.
Other areas in Kentucky, as well as parts of the South, are also experiencing floodwaters. The severe weather, which began last week, claimed at least 20 lives. I'm Julie Walker.
One American state is suing the Trump administration over transgender athletes in women's sports. We'll tell you which one and what it's saying when America in the Morning returns after this. Speaker Mike Johnson and Florida GOP Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna say they've cut a deal to end the fight over proxy voting for new parents, which would reopen the House floor after nearly a week of legislative paralysis. Sue Aller has details.
Century-old rules in Congress require members to be physically present to vote. New mothers serving in Congress face challenges due to this requirement. Sarah Jacobs, a Democrat from California, told CBS News that she hopes to have a family one day.
I want to be able to represent my community, and I want to be able to have a family, and it shouldn't be so hard to figure out how to do both.
Florida Republican Representative Anna Paulina Luna's push for remote voting for new parents led to a standoff in Congress, paralyzing proceedings for nearly a week. Luna advocated for proxy voting, allowing new parents to designate a colleague to vote on their behalf for up to 12 weeks after childbirth. House Speaker Mike Johnson opposed this.
We're the pro-family party, so we'll do that. But we can't do something that violates the Constitution or destroys the institution we serve in.
The standoff ended with a compromise, vote pairing, a process where an absent member pairs with a present member voting on the opposite side, effectively canceling out their votes. The resolution allows Congress to move forward and end the standoff. I'm Sue Aller.
The state of Maine announced it's suing the Trump administration to try to stop the government from freezing federal money in the wake of a dispute over transgender athletes in sports. The president and the Pine Tree State locked in a battle over the Title IX anti-discrimination law and the participation of transgender students in high school sports. Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins said earlier this month that the U.S. Department of Agriculture was pausing some money for Maine's educational programs because of what she described as Maine's failure to comply with Title IX. The freeze means the state's child nutrition program is not able to access several sources of funding. The Trump administration argues the state cannot openly violate federal law and expect federal money to continue. More accusers are coming forward with new claims and allegations against now closed psychiatric and juvenile detention facilities for children in New Jersey. Correspondent Lisa Adams-Wagner reports.
The number of lawsuits alleging sexual assaults and other abuse at state-run child treatment centers in New Jersey has risen to 150 after 2 more were filed this week. 2 lawsuits involving 16 people were filed Thursday. The victims are seeking damages stemming from alleged abuse at the former Arthur Brisbane Treatment Center and the training school at Skillman. Both centers have been shuttered for decades. The majority of the earlier cases revolve around open facilities, including the New Jersey Training School, which the governor has said would be closed. A new law allows child victims to sue until they turn 55, or within 7 years of their first realization that the abuse caused them harm. I'm Lisa Adams-Wagner.
Dentists may have a hard time with this, but there are reports out of the Department of Health and Human Services that the days of having fluoride in your water may be numbered. Lisa Dwyer has details.
Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says that he plans to tell the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to stop recommending fluoridation in drinking water, and that he is assembling a task force to focus on the issue. The Environmental Protection Agency has also announced that it is reviewing new scientific information on the potential health risks. Kennedy cannot order communities to stop fluoridation, but he can tell the CDC to stop recommending it and work with the EPA to change the allowed amount. Last month, Utah became the first state to ban fluoride in public drinking water, pushing past opposition from dentists and national health organizations who warned that the move could lead to medical problems that disproportionately affect low-income communities. I'm Lisa Dwyer.
Scientists researching at major universities believe the future of AI may be a collective, much like the Borg from Star Trek. Here's Chuck Palm with today's tech news.
Resistance is futile.
Computer scientists from MIT, Yale, and Loughborough University have outlined a vision for the future of artificial intelligence, and it's strangely like the Borg from Star Trek. These scientists are predicting a future where a collective AI or a network of AI units will learn and share knowledge, and it could possibly revolutionize fields like cybersecurity, healthcare, and disaster response. These scientists admit that they were inspired by sci-fi concepts like the Borg, but with built-in safeguards. A democratic AI model aims to promote rapid learning and collaboration without a central control unit. In fact, they even compare it to a hive-like mind, enabling fast, adaptable responses across multiple fields without the risk of a communal centralized control. According to an article on SciTech Daily, this approach would allow AI systems to evolve more rapidly and efficiently, pooling their individual experiences. You can find me on X at Chuck Palm.
Robert Workman has sports.
The NCAA Men's Basketball Championship game last night, Florida rallied past Houston 65-63 for their third national title. The Cougars held Gators star Walter Clayton Jr. scoreless in the first half, building a small halftime edge up to 12 points before the first TV timeout of the second half. Then Clayton began to find the range, and by the 8-minute break, Florida had pulled even. Houston led by 1 with 2 minutes left, and then never scored again. The Gators couldn't buy a basket either, but hit 3 free throws and forced 4 Cougar turnovers down the stretch. Clayton finished with 11 points and 7 assists, and that, along with his 64 points in the previous 2 games, earned him most outstanding player honors.
This is an exclamation mark on the year, and it's just great to win like that, knowing the fact that we just a brotherhood together, and we've just been picking each other up all year.
Baseball following an afternoon visit to the White House to mark their World Series title last year. The Dodgers lost to the Nationals 6-4. Shohei Ohtani, though, came within a double of hitting for the cycle in the defeat. Reds shut out the Giants 2-0. Hunter Green came within 1 out of a 4-hit complete game. Mets blanked the Marlins 2-0, a 4-armed 7-hitter for their 5th straight win. Cubs throttled the Rangers 7-0. Justin Steele allowed 3 hits over 7 innings. Colin Ray got the last 6 outs in order. Blue Jays ripped the Red Sox. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. with a couple of hits in his first game since reportedly agreeing to a 14-year extension worth $500 million. Wins for the Orioles, Royals, Tigers, Mariners, Pirates, and Padres. NBA, the Kings beat the Pistons and the Heat topped the Sixers. The regular season ends on Sunday. NHL wins for the first-place Jets, along with the Lightning, Ducks, Kraken, and Flames. That's Tuesday Sports.
A new study links marijuana to your heart. We'll spark that topic when America in the Morning returns. Stay with us. He provided both the explosive percussion on hits like Call Me and the laid-back rhythm on the reggae-influenced The Tide Is High. Clem Burke, the versatile drummer for 70s punk disco rock group Blondie, passed away. In a posting on social media to announce his death, singer Debbie Harry and guitarist Rick Stein called Burke the heartbeat of Blondie and a source of inspiration both on and off the stage. In between Blondie stints, Burke briefly played drums for the Ramones back in 1987. He also played with music legends like David Bowie and Bob Dylan. Burke, who was born Clement Anthony Bozuski from Bayonne, New Jersey, passed away after a battle with cancer. He was 70 years old. Is marijuana bad for your heart? A study published by the American Heart Association found that using pot resulted in 36% higher odds for coronary heart disease, heart attack, or stroke. Researchers said that THC in marijuana can inflame arteries and tissues, increasing heart rate and blood pressure. The news comes after the mother of a 25-year-old man in Atlanta who died of heart disease spoke out after her son's autopsy showed a plaque buildup in his arteries. A toxicology report showed the man had THC in his system from taking gummies, but the autopsy could not pinpoint the use of marijuana as the cause of death. It was a reunion 50 years in the making for the Fonz, Richie Cunningham, Ralph, and Potsy. Kevin Carr reports on the recent Happy Days reunion.
Fans of the classic sitcom Happy Days got a huge treat this past weekend at Steel City Comic-Con in Pittsburgh.
Ron Howard, Henry Winkler, John Most, and Anson Williams.
Happy Days premiered on ABC in 1974. Originally envisioned as a vehicle for a young Ron Howard, the character was eventually supplanted by audience favorite Arthur Fonzie Fonzarelli, played by Henry Winkler. When the actors gathered together on stage in Pittsburgh, Winkler was the first to point out how long it had been since they were all together.
I'm just talking emotionally here. This is the first time that we have appeared this way in 50 years.
Howard left the series after season 7 in 1980, as did Donnie Most, who played Ralph Malph, but they both returned as guest stars in later years. Winkler's math may be a little off, with it being closer to 40 years since they had gathered. However, that did not stop Howard from offering his insight into the reunion.
It feels like 50 minutes because we've been having so much fun, hanging, and this was our sort of our great excuse to come together, so thank you.
A series about nostalgia for the 50s and 60s has now become a series that is nostalgia, particularly for Generation X who grew up with the show. The popular sitcom was a ratings giant and had multiple spin-offs, including Laverne and Shirley and Mork and Mindy. I'm Kevin Carr.
America in the Morning for Tuesday, April 8th, 2025 is produced by Jeff McKay. I'm Clayton Neville in for John Trout, and this is Westwood One.